join?
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm here, thanks Nitin, thanks to the PCI Security Standards Council. It's great to see this forum happening. First time in India. Being one of the first PCI sisters, it's heartening to know that there is so much interest in the standards, and the council is doing a fantastic job here. So thank you. I'm here for a reason. Pretty short and sweet. I have 30 minutes, and I didn't know when I accepted this that I would be between you and the lunch. So I'll make sure that you guys have something to digest well at lunch. The next 30 minutes is going to be short and sweet in terms of what are the key learnings that we can take back home. Even if we were able to implement or increment 1% of your security posture in your respective organization, I think the objective is met for the next 30 minutes. So that's my key objective. Before I get started, one of the key things that I would say this forum is at the right time because of the fact that all of us know, we had these sessions in the past, that India is actually witnessing a major payment disruption. The kind of payments that we are seeing today was never there earlier. Come on. We've been, I still remember those days when we had to actually have the card, call the bank if your card gets blocked. I used to do audits way back, financial audits, being an accountant, having an accounting background. And they used to call up the bank and say, is this card active? And then they would pass the transaction. And today, we are actually leading the disruption, the payment disruption, with the P2P payments happening with UPI, right, at the end of the day. Never have, here today, India as a country is actually leading the pack in terms of the payment disruption that's happening across the world. And so this forum, payment security standards, could not have had a better time than today or now. So right time, the right event, and talking to the finest minds in payment data security, it's a great honor, and I thank you all for actually making this possible. So moving forward, what I intend to cover today, three simple things. One, stats. I know I don't have too much time of yours here, so we're going to talk about some stats. I've also had the opportunity of being a core forensic investigator, and just not being the first assessor, I've also been the first core forensic investigator here in India. And so some of the stats that we put together, we call that as a SIRF report, which is a Security Incident and Response Forensics Report 2018. So a quick overview of what are the key learnings, right? At the end of the day, that's what you would want to hear from me. Few compromises, what is the trend? One of the common questions that we often get is what kind of compromises are you seeing out there? Is it very sophisticated? Is it simple? So I'll probably talk about the extreme cases of compromises. And I would like to spend some time on the key learnings, because at the end of the day, my objective, and our objective here together, is to implement 1% of your cybersecurity posture in your respective organization. And that's it. That's the biggest ROI that you will get in the next 30 minutes. With that, getting started, the first thing is in terms of stats. What do the stats look like? So remember, these are our own forensic reports. So we've collated all the facts here. We have broken it up into 6 sections. First, starting with network, then it goes on to data security, vulnerability management, access controls, development, and then monitoring. So it's broken up into 6 major sections. And there we talk about how many organizations, when we actually did the forensic investigation, did meet a particular PCI requirement. So that's what the statistics is all about, an important slide. I'll spend a few minutes on this. But before I get started with this, or just a show of hands as to how many of you are new to PCI DSA standard. Just show of hands. Just 1, 2, okay. All right. So I'll make sure that I bridge, because when I actually reference to PCI DSA's requirements, I want to make sure that all of you are in sync with what I'm talking about. So first, with respect to network, right? The network, obviously we're talking about, for those of you who know the standard pretty well, we're talking about network segmentation. We're talking about requirement 1 and 2. And for those of you who do not know PCI DSS standard or have not got the opportunity to delve deeper into it, it's largely talking about perimeter security. Now, if you look at the stats there, it shows 62% of the organizations essentially have not met or have not had met or followed any of those best practices which are prescribed within the payment security best practices, if I were so to call, because the PCI DSS standard is the gold standard in payment security, so you can benchmark against that. So we've got 62% of organizations when we did the forensic investigation, had not met your network security best practices. Similarly, when you look at data security, right, your data at rest, your data during transmission, how have organizations once again fared? So you got 67% of organizations at the end of the day had not met basic security hygiene with respect to data security, which is, for all of you who are familiar with the PCI DSS requirements, it talks about the fact that you need to keep the data standard, as minimum as possible, talks about protecting it during storage, talks about encryption, talks about key management, those basic hygiene. And then of course, the fact that it has to be protected during transmission. Then comes the vulnerability management. One of the key things that we've, I'm sure, how many of you have heard of the Equifax breach? All right, okay, super. Do you know when was the Apache Struts vulnerability released? Any guesses? March 11th, if my date was right. And when do you think they were compromised? May 13th, right? At the end of the day, May 13th is when they were compromised. So vulnerability management happens to be, and I agree with Rohini, which she actually made that point earlier, that vulnerability management is one of the biggest problems today. And it's actually a business problem as well. How do you patch 2,000 branches across the country or probably international in a matter of less than 90 days or 60 days there? Right? So this is one of the major issues of actually, when I talk about ingress, point a little down my slides, I would actually be able to tell you as to how vulnerability management is being exploited by fraudsters or intruders. Then is access controls. That's something that we always know. We've seen privilege escalation or privilege elevation that essentially happens. And then that's one common way in which fraudsters are able to gain super user access or power user access, and then are able to do whatever they want in terms of penetrating the network. And then development. We've spoken this. I'm sure all of you, those of you familiar with PCI requirements, know the emphasis of proper secure coding practices that has to be followed. One of the other starking findings that we said is organizations do at some points in time, and thanks to the enforcement that's happening, you see a lot of PADSS validated applications being used. Some of the startling facts on our forensic investigation has been that even a PADSS validated application, while it's there, but has not been implemented properly because of the implementation guide, you see compromises still happening there. Because at the end of the day, the way we look at from a development standpoint is one is of course design vulnerabilities, second is the implementation vulnerabilities, and third is the configuration vulnerabilities. So development has to be looked at holistic, in a holistic way, and development is one major concern once again in investigations that we've done. Monitoring, my favorite topic. I've never, in any of a forensic investigation, we've always had some kind of a learning that essentially has always happened when it comes to monitoring. Kind of agree once again with the earlier speaker that monitoring is an important component. In one of the investigations, from a compromised period, that we asked for the logs, they said only for that particular period of compromised period we do not have the logs, but we have it for the rest of the time. So fantastic, but unfortunately you had a compromise in that period of time, you need those logs. So monitoring is a big issue in today's world, and we need to actually, together as a community, work to make sure that these essential basic hygiene is actually followed during our implementation, the PCI implementation. Remember, 1% increment in your security posture. Moving forward, the compliance landscape, something that you need to chew on. but worth looking at it, how many organizations were certified and got compromised. There is some facts there, but at the end of the day, the point that we need to understand is effective implementation of the requirements of the standard is what will get you to make sure that you are not just compliant, but also inching and improve your security posture. So key emphasis, and whatever in the last two slides, one message that I would like to put across here to this August audience is don't look at the PCI requirements just from a compliance standpoint, but try to implement it in through spirit. Implement it in through earnestly, so that at the end of the day, you just don't meet that compliance certificate, but you actually are able to improve your security posture. Like the way some of the speakers have spoken earlier, they've used the PCI as a standard as improving their security posture. And these are no new requirements at the end of the day, they are best security practices. So you can use this to implement and elevate your security posture. So, how many of you are familiar with the Lockheed Martin kill chain? Lockheed Martin kill chain? Any? Sure, okay, great. So, our friend here knows. So, typically there is a seven-step kill chain process, right? I've simplified it for my own purpose here. I made it three-step kill chain, right? A kill chain is a term that is actually picked up from the military at the end of the day, as to how they actually, in the days of surgical attacks, this makes sense to you. So three-step kill chain is ingress, lateral movement, and egress. So ingress is when you are actually able to penetrate a particular organization, right? So the intruder is able to get into a particular environment. And then you have a lateral movement, that is, you move from one system to another system, and then you navigate and then egress. And many people think that, hey, my data is safe inside the environment, and I have made sure that I have the best protection layer on that particular key jewels that is inside my organization. Fantastic, you do that. But you should also remember that there are a number of other systems from where you can actually jump in and then do lateral movement. And that's what we've seen, is that most organizations and most of our compromises and most of the forensic investigations we have done, it is never your ATF switch server or your POS controller which has been directly attacked. It is always through those neglected systems which are at the perimeter that needs to be jumped in or used as a conduit to actually get into your network. So, or get into the suspected compromised entity. So we got the ingress, and so one of the common questions we often get is what are the three common ingress points that you see out there in the wild? And the answer to that is there on your screen here. One is publicly accessible application. When you actually go ahead and do a search for any domain, right, be it say SISA.com, you would see essentially a lot of subdomains, and then you can actually know that these are publicly accessible web applications. It can be your HRMS application, it can be one of those customers who are asking you to FTP a file and you have to open up a domain for them, which unfortunately you opened it up but didn't get closed. So there could be any such kinds of applications which are publicly accessible. And we have seen this number of times that people have actually used a publicly accessible application to actually penetrate into your network or into the compromised entity. Second is spear phishing. Very, very common. Today, the fact that I'm speaking here, it's being broadcasted, everyone knows today where I am, and it's publicly available information, right? At the end of the day, and digital identity. Today, while we talk about security, it's also important that all this is actually out there in the web, right? So people do know who's the CEO of a company, who's their CTO, where is he, they have a lot of context. And so spear phishing has become a lot more easier, right? So IT administrator, what purchase decisions are they doing? So I can actually spear phish and do a targeted attack on a particular IT administrator or a particular super user, and then make him just click one, and then I'm in. And that's what I want at the end of the day, right? And it can be a normal user. Right? And we've seen this number of times. In one investigation which we did, it was an IT administrator who had access to their ATM switch, which got compromised and was used as a conduit to actually penetrate into the network. Third is the outside the secure segment. That's one of the things we've seen this. You've heard this of the investigations that have happened not just in India but elsewhere, that it was some segment at the end of the day which was used to compromise. And which are those? Any guesses? Those are your antivirus servers, your patch management servers. Because imagine you have a bank which has 2,000 branches across the country, and you have an antivirus server which also talks to different levels of security segments. You have a higher level security segment, you have a lower level security segment. And which one is the common point which talks to both of them? Is these patch management, antivirus, your domain controllers. So typically what happens, and we spoke a lot about scoping, fantastic. But how do you scope these common area segments? And that's something we always grade when we actually do grapple with when we actually do PCI DSS compliance. Something that you need to actually keep in mind how secure and the PCI requirements. I'm sure all of you are familiar. Talks about network testing your network segmentation. You do penetration testing. But while you do all that, you need to do it with all honesty, because these are the three ingress points. So one, increment of your security posture. One, take care of, even if you were to take care of one of them in some ways, either product, process, people, solution, you can actually increment that 1% of your security posture. The next, moving on, compromises. What kind of compromises are we seeing? This is a common question that we get. Are you seeing something really, really sophisticated? Earlier we were asked a number of times, okay, are you seeing, how did this entire attack happen without actually getting a pin? Now, I can't talk obviously of specific forensic investigations that we have done or I have been included in, but some of the things that you can definitely learn is you've seen the simplest of those compromises also happening, which is a cashier goes there, wants to probably take a big, a screenshot of his screen and probably send it to his headquarters, downloads a free image capture software on his desktop, and then he compromises because he also comes with an unauthorized executable along with that particular download. So he has this. Now that is good enough because he happens to be your possible tool. And one of the common things that we are seeing is memory strippers. Right? I'm sure all of you have heard that. Biggest and common merchant compromises are memory strippers, and that's one thing that you see. The easiest and the simplest out there is there. And then of course what's the most sophisticated compromise that you're seeing in the wild? The most sophisticated, obviously, we've seen a couple of, and I'm sure all of you would have got that insert, which we have, I'm not sure how many of you read it, but we put an insert on in each of your folders on the fake response malware attack that we are seeing. And we had actually issued this advisory way back in 2017, in December 2017. So this was a compromise, which essentially happened without having to compromise a particular, compromise, basically ATM cash out. I'm sure all of you have read it. Lance spoke about it earlier. Some of those, he put a great together as to what kind of compromises we are seeing across, not just in the world, but in India as well. So you see that kind of compromise that is happening, which is a lot sophisticated without having to compromise, because we all know, many of us are from the banks here, that no one other than the cardholder or the customer essentially should know the PIN in clear, right? So at the end of the day, except for the issuing function, which is they need to reconnect till the card essentially gets printed or embossed or personalized, whatever it is. But then after that, no one in the ecosystem should essentially know the PIN has control of that switch. So now what it does, this malware, and this is how the ATM cash out can happen without having to know your PIN, because it's just looking for a particular set of cards, a particular set of account numbers that it is waiting, and it passes the one which is not the one which it has in terms of record, which the intruder would know, but the ones which are there. So the genuine transactions keep continuing to happen. But the fraudulent transactions, the moment it sees that, and what it does is passes a success message without hitting the payment switch. That means it's not getting authorized at the payment switch itself. So this was an attack that we've been seeing, and it continues to compromise a lot of banks. And for details, you can actually refer into the your kit that you've got on the fake response malware. So the red essentially shows that when a particular transaction essentially is hitting the ATM switch, it does not go into the switch database to see if the card is active. It can be an expired card, and obviously it doesn't check for the limits. So you can cash out, and that's how millions of dollars, I'm sure all of you have read that in the papers, right, ranging from Bangladesh to Thailand. There are lots of compromises that are happening. So these are the things that we are seeing. So what, at the end of the day, what are our key learnings? In the last few minutes, I want to spend on this slide. Hopefully enough to chew for your lunch. So what are the few learnings that we have? 5 key learnings. That's all that you need to do. 5 key learnings. And what are those 5 key learnings? 1, identify your data. You know, there is this great Sun Tzu, the great Chinese warrior, essentially say, know thyself and know thy enemy. Right? So know thyself, know your data, where your data is. Because if you do not know where your data is, there is no way that you can essentially protect. Right? So data discovery is an important component. It is mapped with the PCI requirements 3.1. For those of you who are from the PCI background, 3.1, data discovery is important. Run it. One of the common arguments that we get, I know that the data is not getting processed. Why do I need to run those scans? The reason is, how do you know? Right? How do you know that there's no data being processed? No, we have talked to the engineering team. How do you know there's no clever IT administrators taking a backup of the production data? How do you know no one has actually put a debug log enabled so that when the transactions are actually happening, is someone is actually logging the data and someone is actually backing that up at a later point in time? How do you know? And for that, you need to do a proper data discovery exercise. Second, monitoring. We spoke about it earlier. Key thing. Many organizations don't even know, and we have to knock the doors. The network have to knock the doors and say, hey, there may be some suspicious transaction that is coming from your network. You need to be investigated. Most of them are actually taken aback, and our time to actually start an investigation sometimes can be 180 days, and in some cases a year later we get a call saying that we need to go through our investigation. In some cases there are no logs, because what's the time period that you need to say the logs for? Typically even if you're missing PCI requirements, 1 year. So when you come for an investigation after a year, even for best security practice you can't, because obviously you're logging a lot of data and you can't. So have a proper monitoring system. 95% of the organizations could not detect the response, respect an incident. And as I said, we have had funny instances wherein the logs have not been kept, especially for the compromised period. The third, incident response and forensics, right? Most organizations do not have a plan to handle the incident response and forensics. I'm not talking about middle organizations here. We are talking about organizations which are big enough, mature enough. How do you handle when there is an investigation, when you actually need to do an actual forensic work? I'm not discounting any work here. I'm sure that many organizations have, but that's what we're finding, that many organizations say, hey, I do not know how to handle this. In one case, we had a malware, and typically there is this saying in the world that, or the understanding that everything is on the non-volatile memory, right? But now fraudsters attack your volatile memory, right? So typically what organizations do, we find something suspicious, we turn it off. Well, you just made our job difficult, because now you have just turned down everything that's there in the volatile memory, so we can't even recover the data, right? So you've got persistent malwares which are being done, which are being used. In one investigation, we found that the intruder had actually had a secure erase of their server itself. So at the end of the day, once he actually exfiltrates the data, he's able to do a secure erase of the particular system. So that's the kind of sophistication we are seeing. So have a proper, speed of you taking, or one person taking an action soon after an incident is what you need to plan for, right? And we all know, I'm sure, we saw some earlier speakers quoting the IBM survey, which essentially says your time to respond. And I'm not sure how many of you watched the first 48 hours, which was very popular in the US, and I'm sure Lance knows that. But the typical investigation, even in a crime, is that first 48 hours, if you actually react and respond properly, increases the chance of success of solving the case by 48% or 40 to 50%. Right? So 50% of your case is stronger to contain and take corrective measures if you actually respond well in advance. So have a plan for your incident response and forensics. Third, I spoke about it, vulnerability management. We spoke about the Equifax issue, right? So have a strong plan to actually take care of those vulnerabilities. If you are not able to patch in time, Obviously, for various reasons, for business reasons, we have to bring down the systems, have a plan to address it, have certain key measures to at least make sure that you're able to detect it on time or in time, especially from a monitoring standpoint. So you can actually have a strategy around vulnerability management. Fifth, the last, and I'm sure all of you here would appreciate the PCI risk assessment. Way back in 2012, I was part of the special interest group that wrote this document, guidance document. I still find that this PCI guidance document, which is available for a free download on the PCI Council's website, is still not used by many organizations. Many people use their ISO 27001 risk assessment for PCI DSS risk assessment. And then, I don't want to make this a risk assessment discussion, but largely that is one key area where we have found that organizations have a lot to improve. Because, so one of the key things that people ask is, okay, you've been doing a lot of these investigations, what can we do? We don't want to go through a breach. We don't want to go through this entire exercise. So what can we do? I always say, go ahead and do a PCI risk assessment. Take all these breach case scenarios, take it back home, implement it, and see whether you, if it were to happen in your environment, would you be able to stop it? Would you be able to detect it? Would you be able to take a corrective action? Right? And how do you do that? PCI risk assessment. So there's a beautiful document on, I'm being partial here, I don't know, but at the end of the day, the PCI risk assessment guidance document is a beautiful document. Please refer it. That will be my fifth key learning at the end of the day. So I can guarantee a 1%, not much, a 1%, at least a 1% implemented in your security posture if you were to implement any one of the key learnings that I shared with you today. With that, I come to my last slide, which is questions. So I understand that we are between here and lunch, and you never can compete with the stomach. So I let you guys go, and I look forward to seeing you at our booth, which is at booth 5. I have my colleagues from our forensic investigation team would be happy to answer any of your questions. I know, as a community, if we can work together to solve and implement, security together, I think we may actually make a difference. And we can actually hit, today, cash, even though with all the statistics that we spoke about, is still 92% as per RBI. Right? RBI says that cash still rules 92% of our transactions. It's a huge potential, and as well as problem that we need to solve as a team, as a community. And so 92% cash is not good for any society. Right? At the end of the day, we all know that. Obviously, it avoids audit trail, it creates a number of other challenges, social challenges that essentially come. And one of the biggest impediments, if you look at any survey which is done on digital transactions, digital payment transactions, the number one impediment in that is security. Right? Security is the number one challenge for any adoption of digital payments in any survey that you are essentially seeing. So we together can actually make a change, and 1% increment is all that we are asking for. Thank you so much.